Historic vessels is the next category. What does the M stand for in RMS Titanic, the full name of the historic ship that sank in 1912? Military, monarch, naval, medical.
Going for 2,000. Which of the following is the correct spelling of a word that means the study of family ancestries and histories? Genealogy, 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 genealogy.
Well, I would like to ask the audience on this one, please.
All right, audience, David needs your help. On your keypads, vote now.
I think I know what it is, but...
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to ask the audience.
All right.
I think they know.
All right, audience, Tanya needs your help.
Okay. Can I ask the audience, please?
You can. Right, audience, this is the question. It's a serious one. It's worth £20,000. Here it comes. Traditionally, what is the only occasion when alcohol is allowed into the chamber of the House of Commons? There are only two possibilities. B is budget speech, or C is state opening.
I think I should use my my lifeline, my friend.
Your phone a friend?
My phone a friend.
Okay.
Is that a good idea? Is he going to know this?
Well, do you have someone who's into animals?
Not really.
No.
Not really.
Maybe the audience is a good idea.
Okay, let's try the audience.
Want to try the audience?
Let's go with the audience.
Now, let's see what they say. We need your help, audience.
91% believe it is monarch. It's a big number.
That is the kind of percentage I like. Anything over 80 is
Good
a
for you.
passing grade. Yes, I believe in the passing grade mark.
Oh,
81% are
Gosh.
saying state opening.
that's big.
That's huge.
That's big.
19% are saying budget speech.
Okay, 72% believe it is genealogy.
That's what I thought, guys. Well, New Yorkers are the smartest people in the world, so the answer is C, genealogy. Final answer.
Well, I was really torn between them, but they look a nice bunch, don't they?
I will go with B, monarch. Final answer.
So I'm going to go with the audience. I'm going to say state opening.
Final answer.
Yes.
It's not.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, it is not monarch. It is male, as in royal mail ship. I know the audience is in total shock.
I think we were all stumped by that.
I tell you what, 81% of this audience are wrong. And that's one of the highest percentages I can ever remember being wrong. Oh, that's awful. 81% are wrong. The right answer is the budget speech.
Whose stupid idea was it to hold the audience?
The crowd's not always correct, is it? The majority gets it wrong. That's the name of the message tonight. How to have guts. I want to talk tonight about a guy named Gideon. Now, who else heard of Gideon in the Bible before?
I've heard his name.
I think pretty much everyone has probably heard of Gideon somewhere. Is Gideon one of like the great heroes of the Bible? No? Yes?
Yeah.
Some say yes, some say no. Most people look at Gideon as a great example, someone that we should look up to for the courage that he showed. Actually, he is one of my most hated Bible characters. I cannot stand Gideon.
You're not supposed to hate.
Well, I know hate's a strong word, but I'm saying I really, really, really don't like Gideon. I I don't think that he should be lifted up as a great example for us. And I'll tell you why. There's 3 chapters in the book of Judges about Gideon. Chapters 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 6 is all about how Gideon was a coward and God came to him and said, Gideon, I want you to do some stuff. And Gideon got all freaked out and God really needed to push him along. And Gideon's like, God, if that's really you talking to me, I need you to do a miracle for me. I'm going to put some fleece out on the ground. And tomorrow morning when I wake up, I want all the dew to be on the fleece and none of the dew to be on the ground. And he needed to test God, basically. He's like, God, if this is really you, I want you to do a miracle for me. You know, you're not really supposed to ask God to prove himself to you. You're just supposed to take him at his word. But God did it, and then God did it for him again. And so that was chapter 6. Then chapter 7, now that's the story where everyone loves Gideon. Gideon goes off to battle, and they're going to go fight. I think it's the Midianites is who they're dealing with. And they go off to fight the Midianites, and Gideon has an army of like 30,000 men. And they're afraid with like these 30-something thousand men. And they're like, man, I don't know. We don't know if we can do it. We don't know if we can kill the Midianites with this many men. We have 30,000, but man, we think that they just outnumber us. So this is what God told Gideon to do. He said, Gideon, send home all the men who are afraid. Gideon's like, God, that's most of the men out here. If I send the men home who are afraid, we're not going to have that many left. So God said, just do it anyway. So they do it, and there's 10,000 men left. About 2/3 of them went home. So now Gideon's army is cut down to 1/3 of what it was before. And they're on their way to the battle, and they stop by a creek or a river or something to get a drink on their way. And while they're getting a drink at the river, God says, look out at all the men who are getting a drink. And the ones who are down drinking out of the river like dogs. So basically, some people kneeled down to scoop up water, and some of them were getting down like dogs to lick it out. God said, only the men who are getting down on the ground like dogs, I want you to keep those and get rid of the rest. So they send the rest of them home, and Gideon's left with, does anyone know how many? 300. Someone had it. Sarah had it. 300 men. I've never seen that movie. I think there's a movie called 300, right? It's like, I think it's a true story, and like these men, there's an army of 300, and they fought off this massive wave of people or something. I don't know. So Gideon went from an army of like 30,000 people, and it gets knocked down to about 300. And he wins the battle. And I won't go into the whole story of how he does it. But it was to show Gideon that when you have God on your side, it doesn't matter how big of numbers you have. All that matters is that you stand with God, and he will be faithful and get you through it. Now, that's the story everyone knows about Gideon. Then you get to the last chapter about his life. And this is the one where he goes off the deep end. So he was all a fearful coward before. In chapter 8, Gideon just he gets too high on himself. And he goes out like marching around. He tells people, give me bread, give me water. And they said, we're not giving you anything. And he tortures them with thorns. And then he goes to another town. He says, give me some bread and water for my men. And they say, why should we give bread and water to you? And he destroys a building and kills a bunch of them. And then he captures one of the kings of the Midianites and brings him over. And he says, we've finally conquered the Midianites. We've tracked you down. We're going to cut your head off. And he looks over and hands the sword to his son and says, I want my son to do it. Think about how traumatizing that would be, right? He went nuts. And then after that, he was so high on himself, he had everyone give him a bunch of gold, and he lived like a king and had a bunch of wives. And I don't like Gideon. I don't think he's a great example, because his life went, really downhill. But I think most people forget about all that terrible stuff he did. Then he had a son who was born who was even worse than him. But I won't go into all that. I'm going to go back to the beginning of Gideon's story, though, when Gideon was a fearful man. And I don't think he's a great example. But I was reading something in my Bible this week. I was reading through just Judges on my own. And I read through something that actually made me a little bit sympathetic to Gideon. Because I don't like Gideon, but I read something that made me kind of understand where he's coming from on some of this stuff. So I want to tell you a little bit about that story tonight. Judges 6:27, I'm putting the verse up here. It's also on your bulletin, but if you want to, you can read it off behind me. And actually, I don't have it in my notes, so I'm just going to have to turn around and read it with you. So Gideon took 10 men from among his servants and did as the Lord said to him. What the Lord had told him to do was, when he first came to Gideon, he said, Gideon, I have a job for you. I want you to fight off the Midianites, but there's an idol in your town. I want you to go destroy the idol. I want you to go chop it down as like a wooden idol. He said, I want you to go chop it down, and I want you to build an altar to me instead. So it said Gideon took 10 men from among his servants and did as the Lord had said to him. But because he feared his father's household and the men of the city too much to do it by day, he did it by night. Because like I said, he's a coward. God didn't tell him to take 10 men. He just told Gideon to go do it. Gideon could go chop down a statue by himself. You don't need 10 people to chop something down, right? But Gideon has to get 10 men. And it said he was so afraid he went and did it by night. This is the kind of stuff that gets on my nerves. Okay. Gets me a little bit angry. Then the men of the city arose early in the morning, and there was the altar of Baal torn down, and the wooden image that was beside it was cut down. And the second bull was being offered on the altar which had been built. So they said to one another, who has done this thing? And when they had inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, had done this thing. So sun comes up, and they can see what's happened to their idol. And you just think, they worshiped this thing as a god. They thought this wooden idol was something so special that they could just bow down to it. And then this is what happened here. And this is what makes me kind of sympathetic to Gideon. You know, I read this story 100 times. Not really. I read this story 10 or 15 times before. And these words had never stuck out to me like they did this week. Then the men of the city said to Joash, remember that's Gideon's father, they said to Joash, bring out your son that he may die, because he has torn down the altar of Baal and because he has cut down the wooden image that was beside it. And when I read that, I got a little bit sympathetic for Gideon finally, because I thought, you know, I give him a hard time for being cowardly and not wanting to just go out and do what God said and need to take the 10 men and having to do it at night. But when I read that, I thought he was doing something that took a lot of courage, because they wanted to kill him when they saw what he'd done. I mean, he was risking his life. In his eyes, he might have not thought he was even risking it. He might have just thought he was giving up his life to go and cut down this idol. So I can give him a pass on doing it at night and all that. I can kind of give him a pass, because now I realize, like, he thought, I'm signing my death warrant by doing this. I'm turning people against me. I'm making myself public enemy number one in this town. And so the town is literally going to kill Gideon over this. And I finally realized what he's risking. I've done a few sermons on fear before. Sometimes I just feel like God wants me to talk about fear. And I usually talk about overcoming your fears. I want to do it a little bit different this time. I want to talk about courage tonight. We talk about overcoming your fears, but I want to talk about what courage is. There's two sides to what courage is in the Bible. C.S. Lewis, I was reading one of his books this week, and this is what he said. There's two sides to courage. Number one, facing danger well. And number two is sticking through the pain. So facing danger well is like what Gideon did here in this story. Gideon saw the danger, and, you know, courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. Gideon's obviously afraid. He obviously still feels fear, but he actually didn't let that just paralyze him. He did probably at first, but you know what? He had the courage to put his feet on the ground, go out there, and do what God told him to do. The courage just to do that. Facing danger well. Doesn't mean you don't have fear, but he got out there and did what God told him to do. So that's one thing. And then number two is sticking through the pain. Sticking through the pain. And that means, you know, some people, their moment of bravery or courage, it doesn't just take 10 seconds or one night. You know, sometimes people have to go through long ordeals. And it's hard to go through those long things, those long processes, something that's like a real inconvenience to their life, or something traumatizing, or something that's just a hardship that they have to deal with. That won't be taken care of in a week or a day sometimes. But you can have courage to get through those times. That's what the Bible talks about. When it talks about courage, it's sticking through the pain is a lot of times what it means. C.S. Lewis said the best way to define the Bible's use of the word courage in modern English is guts. You know, you say, that takes guts. And that's what I'm talking about tonight, how to have guts. That's a really good word when you think about it. Yeah, I hope we all have guts. So Gideon's afraid because God told him to go after the idols. I want to tell you 4 things about courage from that little story that we read. Now, why didn't Gideon go after the idols before? He must have known about the idols. Obviously, he's a believer in God. He knows who God is. Why didn't he go get rid of the idols in the first place? Well, the idols were supported by the crowd. And by the way, the crowd was wrong. You know, the crowd did not have this whole idol thing right. Didn't have this theology thing right, because they were worshiping wood. And that was what the majority was wanting to do. And Gideon had never gone off to do those things before. He probably knew they shouldn't be bowing down to wood. They shouldn't be making sacrifices to wooden altars. That's not God. That didn't create the universe. Gideon knew these things. He didn't go after them before and chop them down to before because they were supported by the crowd. And what would we see in that video? The crowd is not always correct. A lot of times the crowd is wrong. You think about what were some of the things that the guys said when they saw on the Ask the Audience. They would say, like, what's the answer? And answer B gets like 80 or 90%.
And it's wrong.
And it's wrong. What were they saying before that? Oh, well, when you see that many people say something, that's got to be the right answer. Someone's like, 80%, that's a passing grade. That's what we're going to go with. They were saying things like that because you think, well, if that many people believe a certain way, that must be what the right thing is. It just seems obvious. And honestly, if any of us were in his shoes, if we didn't know the answer, we would go with what the audience said, especially when it's not like it was even close to anything else. Everyone thought the answer was B, and then it would turn out to be C or something else. The crowd's not always right. Less than 10% of teenagers in America are at youth group on a Wednesday night. Less than 10%. And I'm not saying every teenager who's not at youth group on a Wednesday night, like tonight, is not saved. That's not what I'm saying. But it is a wonderful thing that you guys are here because you get reconnected with God right in the middle of your week. There's a lot of great benefits to coming to Wednesday night church. Most teenagers are not doing that. It's like less than 10% are actually going to a church on a Wednesday night. And it might be a little bit higher in Joplin than 10%. I don't know. It might not. But I'm just saying, you don't always do what the crowd's doing. The crowd's not always going to lead you in the right direction. A lot of things that, like the crowd that most people believe, is actually not true. Did you know that you can't see what's the only man-made object that you can see from space? Has anyone ever heard of this before?
What?
The only man-made object that you can see from space. What is it? The Great Wall of China. You will hear that from a lot of people, and I found out this week that's actually not true. And I think there's a picture of the Great Wall. You can't really tell. There's a picture of the Great Wall of China there. A lot of people will tell that. I've thought that for years. Until this week, I always thought, oh, turns out once you get to not very many miles up, you can't even see the Great Wall anymore. You can't see it from space, definitely.
So it's really not that great.
I guess it's not really that great. I did see a movie commercial this weekend. That was awful, but there were aliens attacking the Great Wall of China. I don't think it's historically accurate. A lot of people think that bulls get angry when they see the color.
It's not that, it's movement that makes them.
It's movement. Okay, so Nick knows, and he probably knows more about it than I do. Yeah, a lot of people think the color red makes bulls angry, but I guess it's just the movement. So they could be putting any color thing out there, but they always do red. I've always heard this my whole life. What happens if you touch a baby bird?
You get bit.
Angry baby birds. It dies. Why does it die? Yeah, I've always heard that since I was a kid. If you touch a baby bird, well, I read this week that's actually just a urban legend or whatever.
No, that's actually true. If you touch like a baby animal, the mother won't take care of it. That happened to one of her cats.
One of your cats?
Well, I touched one of her cats, and the mother just
That happened with a cat, really?
I had to take care of it.
Okay. That's why you shouldn't have baby cats.
What?
I'm just trying to make you mad. Okay, so number one, the idols were supported by the crowd. And the crowd was wrong. Number two, the crowd tried to kill Gideon. Now, we have to stand up to the crowd sometimes, and our lives are not usually going to be threatened. That's not usually something that we have to face in the United States of America, that people will try to kill us. But there are people who will try to intimidate you sometimes for what you believe. They might try to kind of scare you out of what you believe or try to make you feel bad about it. And that is something that we do have to deal with. You will probably meet people like that. When I worked for a school newspaper in college, I would write articles sometimes that people would kind of get up in my face. I thought, I guess I put my opinion in the newspaper, so I see why some people are angry about it, but I don't know why people get so mad about my opinion. But people would get up in my face for things that I'd said in the editorials and stuff that I wrote. People get mad sometimes about what you believe, and they won't try to kill you, but they might try to scare you a little bit so that you don't talk about it. That's why being a Christian takes guts. Did anyone see that thing I put on the fellowship page on Facebook today?
Yeah.
Johnny Cash quote. Johnny Cash. What was that?
You posted, I
After not having to put the tables up and
Yeah, the picture that I'd put, it was Johnny Cash. Yeah, and Johnny Cash had a quote, and he said, "It's hard to live for God. Being a Christian," he put it like, "Being a Christian ain't for sissies. It takes a lot of courage or bravery to live for God. It takes more than it does to live for the devil. It takes more courage to live for God." And I like that quote. I didn't put it in my PowerPoint, but I like that quote. Here's some of the biggest battlegrounds you guys might have to face. Like, what if you wore a Christian t-shirt to school and they told you something like, "Well, hey, you can't wear that. That's a Christian t-shirt. You know, would you take it off then?" I know this won't apply to your school. What if you wanted to, if you're at a public school, like a lot of you are, and you wanted to give out some Bibles to your friends, and someone from the school, like a vice principal or something, comes up and says to you, "Hey, you can't hand out Bibles to people at school." What if you wanted to wear, what if you were pro-life and you wanted to wear a pro-life t-shirt, and the teacher told you, "You need to go to the bathroom and turn that shirt inside out and come back"? Now, those are actually things that happened in schools. And then the students were kind of intimidated by the officials. And legal teams got together and they told the schools, "You can't do this." And as they went to court, they'd say, "You can't tell someone they have to turn like a Christian t-shirt inside out, or that they can't hand a Bible out to their friends." You know, the courts had to get involved and say, they have a right to do that. But you know what? You know, you don't have a legal team right behind you all the time. So in that moment, what do? It can be intimidating, right? A few weeks from now, there's going to be a new president who puts their hand on the Bible. And they get inaugurated and they swear on the Bible that they will uphold the Constitution, and they take the oath of office. They do that on TV as the president, and then if a principal were to open up a Bible in a school and read something out of it to the students, he'd probably get fired or something like that, depending on where the school was, because some people really hate the Bible so much. There's a big battleground for religious freedom in schools. And we are it's getting close to 8. I was going to give you guys some ideas about some things you should know about your rights, but I won't do that tonight. But I just wanted you to see here, the crowd tried to kill Gideon. Now, we don't have to worry about getting killed. But when I do look on the news sometimes, and I see these groups like ISIS, these terrorists that are out in the Middle East, they go around and they will cut people's heads off because, literally, I'm not just saying that. They do all kinds of things to kill people. Not always cutting their head off, but there's all kinds of creative ways. That they do that because the people are Christians, or because they're Jews, or because they're just what they see as not good enough Muslims. Now, I mean, think about that. Would you let someone come and cut your head off for Jesus? Now, we can ask ourselves that question. We might not ever have to deal with it physically, but when I look at those people who are willing to die for Jesus like that, for what they believe in about God, when I see their courage, that makes me have a lot of courage to say, you know, when people might try to intimidate or scare me for what I believe in America, I can stand up to that, because there's other people who are dealing with way worse, and I can look at them as an inspiration and say, they can deal with that. I can deal with the smaller persecutions that come my way. That makes it a lot easier. That really inspires me. Number 3, Gideon could have courage because Gideon trusted God. Even though Gideon, he wasn't perfectly fearless, but he could know that he was right because he was agreeing with what God said. Whenever you agree with what God says, it doesn't matter how big the crowd is that disagrees with you. It doesn't matter how many of them there are. You are right because you agree with God. And that's what Gideon was doing. He was agreeing with what God said about that idol. It had to come down. You know, if you just trust yourself, you're not always going to come to the right conclusion. You're not always going to be right then if you just trust yourself. It's a lot easier if you will trust God than when you're trusting what God says, you know that you're correct. You don't have to even come up with the answer yourself. You're just saying, I just agree with God. There's this book series. It's called the what is it? Berenstain Bears. Right, the Berenstain Bears. Now, who's all seen the Berenstain Bears books as you're growing up? Yeah, everyone has. I'm going to blow your minds here. Did you know they're not called the Berenstain Bears?
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I saw this post on Facebook. The
Berenstain Bears is actually the Berenstain Bears. It's spelled right here, Stain. And we've all been pronouncing it wrong this whole time. And people will swear, it's the Berenstain Bears. It has always been the Berenstain Bears. It says that on every book. But we all call it the wrong thing. Okay, does anyone else have your mind blown right now?
No.
Yeah. No? Okay. When I saw that, I'm like, nuh-uh. There's actually people out there, and this might have been what the post on Facebook was about. the Mandela effect, where some people think that we're in an alternate universe. Somewhere we switched over to another universe where it was Berenstain over there, and we got stuck in this one where it's Berenstain, and things just aren't right. Here's another one. And I get this every time I tell someone my name. What do people say to me?
Hey, Luke.
Oh, your name's Luke? What do they say?
Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. Luke, I am your father. Did you know that's not the line from the movie?
Yeah.
I actually have to get in fights with people about this one sometimes. He doesn't even say the word Luke. He just says, no, I am your father. Yeah. But they always think it's Luke, I am your father. So that's what they always say to me whenever they see me. Here's one more.
You must have a lot of kids then.
Whenever the Snow White cartoon from like 50 years ago, she goes, no, not that Snow White, the queen, the evil queen. She goes to the mirror, and what does she say to the mirror?
Mirror on the wall.
Yeah, that's not correct. She never says mirror, mirror on the wall. Do you know what the actual quote is?
Yeah.
What?
Mirror on the wall.
She says magic mirror on the wall. But when everybody quotes it and everyone in their head thinks, no, it's mirror, mirror on the wall, right? You guys don't even believe me, do you? She says magic mirror on the wall. Now, okay, that might be all you can think about the rest of the night now. But what I want to say is whenever we trust ourselves, we don't always get it right. We're not, I think some of you are angry at me.
Yeah.
But you know what? We don't always come to the right answer on our own. We don't always get the right answer ourselves. And that's why when we turn to God and we trust God, He will not lead us astray. We'll always come to the right answer. We'll always be right then. Don't you want to be right? I always want to be right. So just trust God and you'll always be right. 2 more verses here. Okay, if you agree with Charlene, you'll also be right.
Yes.
But Joash said, this is Gideon's father, he said to all those who stood against him, would you plead for Baal? Would you save him? Let the one who would plead for him be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him plead for himself because his altar has been torn down. So Gideon's dad is saying, well, if Baal's so powerful, let Baal come over here and punish whoever cut his altar down. You know, that's kind of what he's saying. He says, if Baal's so powerful, he can stand up for himself. He doesn't need all you guys to do it. And then this is what it says. Therefore, on that day, he called, it's saying Gideon's dad, named his son something else. He said, on that day, he called him Jerub-baal, saying, let Baal plead against him because he has torn down his altar. Jerub-baal is a name that means like he who fights with Baal, he who cut Baal down. And he said they changed Gideon's name that day to Jerub-baal, saying, your name now means the one who went up against Baal. So they respected him for what he had done. And that's what my fourth point here is, my fourth and last point. The crowd respected Gideon whenever he showed courage. When you don't stand for what you believe, the crowd will never respect you then. They will never take your beliefs seriously. If you don't stand for what you believe, they aren't going to take your beliefs seriously. And whenever you falter and when you won't stand up for like the things of God, the things that you know are right, when you won't stand up for those things, you will not shine brightly as a Christian. Your light will just be dimmed out. People aren't going to take you seriously. They're not going to believe that you believe what you believe. So what are your chances to shine? You know, it's like when everyone else is making fun of someone, everyone else is mocking a person, you know, are you going to join in with all of them and mock that person too? No. Or are you going to step back from that and say, that's not the kind of thing that I say. I don't joke around like that. I don't make fun of people that way. Or if everyone's gossiping about someone, you know, this can be harder. If people are spreading gossip, are you going to help share that gossip? Or are you going to be the one to say, you know, those are rumors. I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to repeat it. You know, that takes courage sometimes because people want to know the juicy details. They were like, whoa, did you hear about so-and-so? Let's talk about it. And sometimes you have to have the courage then. You need a little bit of courage to say, I'm not going to talk about someone like that behind their back. Not to repeat a lie. Maybe everyone believes this lie, but you have to ask yourself, am I going to repeat the lie right then? A few months back, there was an NFL player named Colin Kaepernick. And he would not stand for the national anthem because he believed that our country is very racist against black people and that cops are trying to target black people to kill them. Now, I did not agree with what Colin Kaepernick. I did not agree with what Colin Kaepernick was saying. I thought it was completely wrong. But it took courage for him to stand up he was kneeling during the national anthem. It actually takes courage for someone to do that. I mean, I will admit, even though I didn't agree with what he was saying, he's the only person on his team. And that's probably hard. He had to stand out from the crowd. He had to say, I'm going to be the only one who's kneeling here for this thing. That actually does take courage. Now, I don't agree with what he was kneeling for, but I will admit it took courage to do that because he had to stand out from the crowd. And even though I don't agree with what he was kneeling for, that's just me personally. You might agree with it. I didn't agree with it, but I know that he believes what he says he believes. I mean, even though I don't think he's right, I know he actually believes it in his heart because he was willing to go that far for it. I don't think he was just doing it for attention or something like that. I think he was doing it because he actually believes that about our country. Whenever you're willing to put yourself out there and make a courageous stand, that does take courage, but people will know that you believe what you say you believe. And that's what you want people to say about you. You don't want people to say, oh, he says he's a Christian, but he talks the same way we talk. He acts the same way we act. He does the same things that we do. That's not what we want people to say about us. But we want people to say that we actually believe what we say we believe. As I close down, there's this movie that came out this weekend. It's called Hacksaw Ridge. I haven't seen it. I don't know anything. I don't know much about it. It's a movie about a guy who was in World War II, and he was a Christian. He was a type of Christian called a Seventh-day Adventist, and they do not believe in war. They don't believe in fighting. Not all Christians believe that way. I don't, but he got drafted into the military to go fight in World War II, and he didn't believe in fighting. And so he had to deal with, and I looked up his true story. I mean, he had to deal with the other soldiers mocking him for what he believed. They looked at him like a traitor because he wouldn't pick up a gun and go out there. He got drafted in. He didn't have a choice. But he wouldn't go out and shoot the people and stuff like that. They're like, what if someone's trying to kill me? Are you going to save my life and shoot that German or whatever? Or he was in Japan, actually. Are you going to shoot the guy before he can kill me? He didn't believe in violence, so he wouldn't do it. People thought he was a traitor. And he's the subject of this movie. I'm not saying to go see the movie or anything. But you know that he believed what he said that he believed. And this was a man who, when he went into the military, he got injured like 4 times. He was hospitalized for 5 years after the war. He went in as a medic. He said, all I'm going to do is be a medic. I will go heal people. I won't kill people, but I will go in and heal people. And he went through it as a medic, and he ended up saving, even though he got injured or shot 4 times and had to have be hospitalized for years and had breathing problems the rest of his life, he saved the lives of 75 men. He lost a lung and all that, but he saved the lives of 75 men by acting as a medic out on the battlefield. He saved 75 people. So he actually got the Medal of Honor. That's what's in this picture. He's the only conscientious objector to a war that ever got the Medal of Honor. Now, a lot of people don't agree with what he was doing, that he wouldn't go fight for his country. They didn't agree with that. But we look at him and we know he believed what he said that he believed in. And that's what I want people to say about everyone in this room, that they say they're a Christian and they believe what they say that they believe. We can tell by the way that they act. I'm going to pray and let us go, but I just want you guys to think about that this week. And thank you guys for being at church tonight. Dear Lord God, thank you for the wisdom that you put here in Gideon's story. Help us to remember what he did, the courage he showed, the courage that we see Christians around the world showing, and help us to have the courage to do the things that we need to do, God. The things that you've put in our path, the things that you have us to do. You prepared works for us, God, and we want to be bold and accomplish those things. So, God, please just give us the guts to get through it all. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.